All right, thank you guys. Welcome to week 11. And real quick, if you find yourself enjoying this video here today, please feel free to give it a thumbs up by smashing that like button. And if you want to connect with me on a daily basis, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well and join the Brock Page family. Now guys, I'm feeling pretty good here today because we are hitting at 61% in our last 18 NFL tier package picks on BrockPage.com. We're also 3-0 in our last 3 college football tier package picks on that very same website. Now we currently have over 905 members who are signed up and active on that webpage. And if you want to see which one of these free YouTube picks on my channel that I'm actually betting on personally, there's only one way to do that, and that's to sign up for a membership on my website at BrockPage.com. And with that, guys, let's go ahead and get started. The Patriots take on the Falcons, 8:20 p.m. Eastern start time Thursday night. New England's -7, totals 47.5. Now, the Pats have successfully covered the point spread in their last 4 straight, 5-1 straight up in their last 6. New England's allowing just 17 points a game, and they're in the top 10 in pass defense. J.C. Jackson has 5 interceptions on the season, 38 tackles, and a pick 6 for the corner. Meanwhile, Matthew Judon has 9.5 sacks on the season, along with 37 tackles. Judon's actually 4th in the NFL in sacks. This Patriot defense is in the top 5 in fewest yards allowed per play. Meanwhile, offensively, Mac Jones is completing nearly 70% of his passes for over 2,300 yards. Now, the Patriots have not lost a game on the road yet this season. They're taking on a Falcons team who plays their worst football in Atlanta. They're just 1-3 straight up on their home field, and they failed to cover the point spread 3 times during that stretch. Atlanta's averaging just 19 points a game, and they're in the bottom 5 in rush offense. Now, injury-wise, Smith, Means, Patterson, Bullard, Hurst, Kaminsky, Sheffield, and Hawkins, they're all questionable for Atlanta. Meanwhile, for New England, Collins, Smith, Harris, and Olszewski, they're listed as questionable for them. And when it comes to the total on this one, 2 out of New England's last 4 road games fell under the number. Meanwhile, 2 out of Atlanta's last 3 outings fell under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Patriots -7, under 47.5. Next matchup, it is going to be Ravens-Bears, 1 o'clock Eastern start time this Sunday. Baltimore's -7, totals 45.5. The Ravens failed to cover in their last 3 straight games. 3-6 against the spread overall for the season. Baltimore's in the bottom 3 in yards allowed per play. They're also in the bottom 10 in fourth quarter points allowed on the road. Baltimore's failed to cover the number in 3 out of their last 4 road games. They're taking on a Bears team who's actually playing .500 football at home this year, believe it or not. And as a matter of fact, the Bears still have a top 10 pass defense, and they're also in the top 10 in fewest home points allowed. So I know it seemed really bad here for Chicago, but there are still, not many, but a few bright spots. Now, Robert Quinn has 6.5 sacks thus far in the season, 7 TFLs, and a forced fumble for the linebacker. Meanwhile, Roquan Smith has 93 total tackles on the year, along with 3 sacks and a pick 6. The Bears are currently in the top 3 in fewest first quarter points allowed at home. Meanwhile, offensively, much to my surprise, the Bears are actually in the top 10 in home first quarter scoring. Now, injury-wise, Ogletree, Williams, Mack, Holtz, and Jackson are questionable. Meanwhile, for Baltimore, Williams, Murray, and McCarry are questionable for them. Now, total-wise, Chicago's 3-1 to the under at Soldier Field, 67% to the under for the whole year. Meanwhile, the Ravens saw 3 out of their last 4 road games fall under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Chicago +7, keeping this one close in the under 45.5. Next contest, Packers, Vikings, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Green Bay's -2.5, totals 49. Green Bay successfully covered the point spread in their last 9 straight, 5-1 against the spread on the road this season. The Packers have a top 3 pass defense, and they're allowing just 18 points a game. Sorry about that. What the heck? All right. Rashawn Gary He has 5.5 sacks on the season, 31 tackles and a forced fumble. Meanwhile, Devondre Campbell has 88 total tackles on the season himself, along with a pair of interceptions and a couple of forced fumbles. This Packer defense is in the top 10 in defensive yards per play on the road. Meanwhile, on the other side of the football, offensively, the Pack's in the top 10 in fourth quarter scoring on the road. Aaron Rodgers has thrown for nearly 2,200 yards along with 17 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Devontae Adams has 864 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, they're taking on a Minnesota club who failed to cover the point spread in 3 out of their last 4 home games this year. The Vikes are struggling to score points at home, and as a matter of fact, the Vikings score fewer fourth quarter points at home than any other team in football. Meanwhile, defensively, the Vikes are allowing over 130 yards a game rushing. Now, injury-wise, Anthony Barr is questionable for Minnesota. Meanwhile, for the Packers, Bakhtiari, Gary, Kike, and Daphne are questionable for them. Now, total-wise, Green Bay's 5-1 to the under on the road, 80% to the under for the entire season. Meanwhile, Minnesota's 4-0 to the under at US Bank Stadium. I'm going to lean toward Green Bay, -2.5, under 49. Next contest, Lions-Browns, 1 o'clock East. Cleveland's -10. Total's 44. And despite the recent struggles, the Browns still have a winning record at home this year. This is a huge number, but just hear me out real quick. They're in the top 3 in home pass defense, top 5 in home rush defense as well. Myles Garrett has a staggering 13 sacks on the season. He's leading the NFL in that category. Garrett's also got 34 total tackles and 13 TFLs. And speaking of tackles, Anthony Walker's got 68 total tackles on the season, along with 2 tackles for loss. The Browns are in the top 3 in fewest yards allowed per play at home. Meanwhile, offensively, the Browns, they rush for over 154 yards a game. This is one of the best running attacks in the league. Nick Chubb is rushing for 6 yards a carry, 6 touchdowns on the ground, and 721 total rushing yards for Nick. They're taking on a winless Lions club who scores just 16 points a game. Meanwhile, defensively, the Lions are in the bottom 3 in rush yards allowed per contest. That's really going to hurt them. Injury-wise, Flowers, Williams, Walker, Seibert, Nelson, Jefferson, and Jacobs. They're questionable for Detroit. Meanwhile, for Cleveland, Hill, Williams, Green, and Schwartz are questionable for the Browns. Now, Cleveland saw 3 out of their last 5 home games fall under the line. Meanwhile, Detroit's 4-1 to the under on the road this season, 67% to the under for the entire year. I'm going to lean toward Cleveland -10, under 44. Next matchup, Dolphins-Jets, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Miami's -3, totals 44.5. And despite a 2-game winning streak for Miami, they lost 7 out of their last 9, and they failed to cover the point spread 6 times during that span. The Fins are just 1-4 straight up when traveling, and they allow more pass yards per game on the road than any other team in the NFL. Needless to say, the Fins are in the bottom 3 in defensive yards per play when traveling. They're taking on a Jets club who's playing 500 football at home, and they're actually in the top 5 in pass yards per game at home. I know that sounds crazy, but they have, strung very little success at the Meadowlands. Matter of fact, the Jets are in the top 5 in fourth quarter scoring as well. Now, injury-wise, Wilson and Eccles are questionable for New York. And total-wise, New York's 3-1 to the over at MetLife Stadium, 67% to the over for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward the New York Jets +3, over 44.5. Next matchup, Niners-Jags, 1 o'clock East. San Francisco's -6.5, numbers 45. The Niners have won 2 out of their last 3 ball games. 27 points a game they averaged during that short 3-game span. The Niners are also playing their best football on the road. They're 3-1 straight up when traveling. Top 10 pass defense away from home as well. Nick Bosa has 8 sacks on the year, a couple of forced fumbles, and 13 tackles for loss. Meanwhile, Fred Warner's leading the crew with 82 tackles, along with 3 PBUs. The Niners are in the top 5 in fewest road points allowed. They're taking on a Jacksonville team who really struggles to score points. The Jags are averaging just 16 points a game, and they're in the bottom 5 in home passing. Trevor Lawrence is completing just 58% of his passes, and he's thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. His second leading receiver has 0 touchdown catches and averages just 39 yards a game receiving. Meanwhile, defensively, the Jags are in the bottom 10 in yards allowed per play. Now, injury-wise, O'Shaughnessy and Chark, they're still on the IR. Meanwhile, for San Francisco, Kirkpatrick, Hasty, and Mitchell are questionable. Total-wise, 2 out of San Francisco's last 4 road games fell under the number. Meanwhile, Jacksonville's 4-1 to the under at home, 7-2 to the under for the entire season. I'm going to lean towards San Francisco, minus 6.5, under 45. Next contest, Texans, Titans, 1 o'clock East. Tennessee's minus 10.5, numbers 44. The Titans have won their last 6 straight, 5-1 against the spread in those 6 victories. The Titans are scoring 28 points a game offensively. Meanwhile, defensively, the Titans are allowing just 98 yards a game on the ground. Kevin Byard has 5 interceptions from the secondary, pick 6 and a scoop and score for the safety. Byard also has a dozen PDs, which ranks 3rd in the league. Harold Landry, he's also 3rd in the NFL in sacks with 10 of them. Landry's also got 52 total tackles on the year. They're taking on a Texans team who's winless on the road, and they score fewer points per contest than any other team in the NFL. The Texans are also dead last in offensive yards per play. Meanwhile, defensively, the Texans are allowing nearly 30 points a game. Now, injury-wise, Kirksey, Brown, and Nickerson are questionable. Meanwhile, for Tennessee, Dupree, Mabin, and Evans, they're listed as questionable for them. And when it comes to the number in this one, the Titans could very well pitch a shutout in this game. They also saw 3 out of their last 5 road games fall under the total. Meanwhile, the Texans are 4-1 to the under when traveling this year. I'm going to lean toward Tennessee, minus 10.5, under 44. Next contest, Colts, Bills, 1 o'clock East. The Buffalo Bills are minus 7, totals 50. The Bills have won 6 out of their last 8 ball games, 75% against the number in those contests. The Bills lead the NFL in home pass defense. Jordan Poyer has 4 interceptions on the season. Micah Hyde with 3 picks himself. Meanwhile, Tremaine Edmonds has 55 tackles and 3 TFLs. The Bills are leading the NFL in fewest yards allowed per play at home. Meanwhile, offensively, Buffalo scoring over 31 points per contest, and they rank in the top 5 in total yards per game. Josh Allen's thrown for over 2,600 yards and 19 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders have combined for over 1,200 receiving yards together. They're taking on a Colts defense who's in the bottom 10 in yards allowed per play. And speaking of the Colts defense, they do tend to break down late in games. They're currently in the bottom 3 in fourth quarter points allowed. Now, injury-wise, Rhodes is out for the Colts. Meanwhile, for Buffalo, Tremaine Edmonds has been battling a hammy, so keep an eye on his status throughout the week. Currently listed as questionable, although I am pretty optimistic he will play. Now, total-wise, Buffalo saw 3 out of their last 5 get over the line. Meanwhile, the Colts are 5-2 to the over in their last 7, 3-1 to the over on the road. I'm going to lean toward Buffalo, minus 7, over 50. Next contest, Washington, Carolina, 1 o'clock East. The new look Carolina Panthers are minus 3, totals 43. Now, the Panthers won 2 out of their last 3 ball games, 34-10 victory over Arizona just this past Sunday. And even though they got a shot of life with Cam Newton offensively, it has actually been this Carolina defense that's been keeping these guys afloat. Carolina has the number 1 pass defense in the league. They're in the top 3 in defensive yards per play. Hassan Reddick's got 9.5 sacks on the season, 11 TFLs, and 45 tackles for the linebacker. Reddick's also got a pair of forced fumbles. Meanwhile, Jeremy Chin leads the roster with 58 tackles, along with a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. Carolina's allowing just 19 points a game. They're taking on a Washington club who lost 4 out of their last 5. Despite their big win over Tampa Bay this past weekend, the football team is also just 2-7 against the spread overall for this season. Washington's in the bottom 5 in road scoring, bottom 3 in first quarter scoring on the road as well. Now defensively, on the other side of the ball, this Washington defense has allowed a whole bunch of passing yards on the road this year. Injury-wise, Thomas, Seals-Jones, they're listed as questionable. Chase Young, he's out for the year. Now when it comes to the scoring in this one, Washington's last 4 straight all fell under the number. Meanwhile, Carolina's 4-1 to the under at home, 70% to the under for the entire season. I'm going to lean toward Carolina -3, under 43. Next matchup, Saints, Eagles, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Philadelphia's -1.5, totals 43. Now, I'll tell you this much, the Birds have not played well in front of Philly. They're 0-4 at the link this season, 1-3 against the number in those 4 home losses. The Eagles have struggled to throw the football in South Philly. They're also dead last in the league in offensive time of possession at home. Now defensively on the other side of the ball, the Birds are in the bottom 10 in takeaways, and they've struggled to stop the run at the link. They're taking on a Saints team who's got a winning road record, and they successfully covered the number in 3 out of their last 5 away from home. Now the Saints have the #1 rush defense in the NFL, and they're in the top 10 in fewest points allowed per contest on the road. Demario Davis has 65 tackles, 10 TFLs for the linebacker. Davis also has 3 sacks and 4 PBUs. Meanwhile, Malcolm Jenkins has 53 tackles and a pick 6 for the D. The Saints lead the NFL in fewest yards allowed per play when traveling. Now, injury-wise, Armstead, Montgomery, Kamara, and Gardner-Johnson, they're all questionable for the Saints. Meanwhile, for Philly, Sayamalo and Sanders are still on the IR. Goddard is listed as questionable. Now, 3 out of Philly's last 4 ball games got over the line. Meanwhile, New Orleans is 5-1 to the over in their last 6 themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Saints +1.5 over 43. Next ball game, Bengals, Raiders, 4:05 Eastern start time. Cincinnati's -1, totals 50, and despite their recent skid, Cincinnati still has gotten the W in 4 out of their last 7 ball games. As a matter of fact, Cincy's got a winning road record this year, and they successfully covered the point spread in 3 out of their last 5 away from home. Joe Burrow's thrown for nearly 2,500 yards along with 20 touchdowns. His favorite wideout, Jamar Chase, has 835 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. This Bengals offense is in the top 10 in offensive yards per play on the road. Meanwhile, defensively, they allow fewer rush yards per game on the road than any other team in football. Logan Wilson has 78 tackles along with 4 TFLs and 4 interceptions. Meanwhile, Von Bell's got 56 tackles and a pair of forced fumbles as well. The Bengals are in the top 5 in defensive yards per play away from home. Now they're taking on a sputtering Raiders franchise who lost their head coach to bigotry, and they also lost their leading receiver to drunken manslaughter. The Raiders are on a 2-game losing streak, and they failed to cover the number in 5 out of their last 7. This Raider defense gives up a lot of points at home, and they also struggle to stop the run in Las Vegas. Now, injury-wise, Kwiatkowski, Richard Nixon, Robertson, and Gillespie are questionable. Meanwhile, for the Bengals, Wilson, Tate, Davis Gaither, and Sample, they're questionable for them. Now, total-wise, Cincinnati saw their last 3 straight get over the number. Las Vegas is 3-1 at the over in their last 4. I'm going to lean towards Cincinnati -1 over 50. Next contest, game of the day, game of the week, really. Cowboys, Chiefs, 425 East. Kansas City's -3, totals 55.5. And although Kansas City's turned it on here over the past few weeks or so, the Chiefs have They've still failed to cover the number in 3 out of their last 4 games. This Kansas City defense is in the bottom 3 in yards allowed per play. They've also had a tough time defending the pass as well. They're in the bottom 10 in pass defense. But it's not just the defense you should be concerned about. I know that sounds crazy, but the Chiefs are in the bottom 10 in offensive yards per play at home as well. So keep that in mind. And speaking of home, this is crazy. Kansas City's a dismal 0-5 against the spread at Arrowhead Stadium this year. They're taking on a Dallas team who's 8-1 against the number overall for the season, first in the NFL in pass yards per game when traveling. Dak Prescott's thrown for over 2,300 yards and 20 touchdowns. Meanwhile, his 2 favorite targets, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, they've combined for over 1,300 receiving yards together and 11 scores. The Cowboys are in the top 3 in offensive yards per play on the road. But it's not just all offense with Dallas. This D has done a really nice job stopping the run. And they're also in the top 10 in fewest points allowed per game on the road. Now, Trayvon Diggs, he leads the NFL with 8 interceptions, 13 PBUs for the corner. Meanwhile, Micah Parsons, he's a man amongst boys. He's got 6 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 58 total tackles for the Cowboys. You should have saw this guy in high school playing running back for Harrisburg. It was unbelievable. Anyway, he's been a man amongst boys like his whole life. But anyway, injury-wise, Dallas is relatively healthy at this point in the week. Meanwhile, for Kansas City, Remmers, Ward, Saunders, and Niang are questionable for them. Now, total-wise, Kansas City's 4-1 of the under in their last 5 ball games. They also saw 3 out of their last 5 at Arrowhead stay under the total. Now, Dallas's last 3 straight fell under the number themselves. I'm going to lean toward Dallas plus 3, under 55.5. Next contest, Cardinals, Seahawks, 4:25 Eastern start time. Arizona's minus 2.5, numbers 49. And despite a bit of a rough patch here recently, the Cards are still a perfect 5-0 straight up on the road this season. And they successfully covered the point spread in all 5 of those victories. The Cardinals are averaging 29 points a game. They're also in the top 10 in total yards per contest. Kyler Murray's completing 73% of his passes, and he's thrown for nearly 2,300 yards and 17 touchdowns. Meanwhile, defensively on the other side of the ball, the Cards are allowing just 18 points per contest, and they rank in the top 5 in pass defense. Marcus Golden has 9 sacks on the season, 6 TFLs, and 30 tackles for the linebacker. Golden also has 4 forced fumbles and a pair of fumble recoveries. Meanwhile, Jordan Hicks leads the club in tackles with 74. They're taking on a Seattle club who lost 4 out of their last 5 ball games, and they have only 1 win at home this year. The Seattle defense is in the bottom 3 in yards allowed per contest. They're also dead last in the NFL in defensive time of possession. Now, injury-wise, Brown, Blair, and Metcalf are questionable. Meanwhile, for Arizona, Murray and McCoy are questionable. Hopkins, Pugh, Garcia, Ward, and Wiggins, they are questionable as well. Now, total-wise, 6 out of Arizona's last 10 meetings with Seattle fell under the line. Meanwhile, the Seahawks are 8-1 to the under for the entire season themselves. I'm going to lean toward Arizona minus 2.5, under 49. Next ball game, Sunday Night Football, Steelers, Chargers, 8:20 Eastern kickoff. LA's minus 5, totals 47. Now, the Chargers have lost 3 out of their last 4 ball games, 1-3 against the spread during that stretch. The Chargers also have a losing record at home, and their defense has really struggled to stop the run on their home turf. Now, offensively, really not much to complain about there, although the Chargers do rank in the bottom 10 in third quarter scoring, so keep that in mind if you're into maybe some prop betting. Now, they're taking on a Steeler team who gives up hardly any points on the road this year. Pittsburgh hasn't lost a game in their last 5 straight, and they're led by TJ Watt, who's got 12.5 sacks on the season. Watt also has 39 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, and a couple of fumble recoveries. Meanwhile, Joe Schobert has 63 tackles and 4 PDs himself. Now keep an eye on Hayden, Watt, and Fitzpatrick. All are questionable for Sunday. Meanwhile, for the offense, Claypool's questionable with a toe, and of course, Big Ben's currently in COVID protocol. Mike Tomlin said today they're preparing for Rudolph to start, but I do think we'll see Big Ben in action Sunday. Just my thought. But anyway, for the Chargers, Bosa, Davis, Jackson, Tillery are questionable. Adderley is out. 3 out of LA's last 5 ball games did get over the line. Meanwhile, the Steelers went 3-2 to the over in their last 5 themselves. Give me Pittsburgh +5, keeping it close in the over 47. Next and final matchup, it is going to be Giants versus the Bucks, 8:15 Eastern start time, Monday night. Tampa Bay is -11, totals 49.5. And despite their 2-game losing streak, the Bucks are still a perfect 4-0 at home, and they failed to cover just 1 time in those 4 home victories. The Bucks have the #1 pass offense in the NFL. 31 points a game they're averaging as well. Tom Brady's thrown for nearly 2,900 yards along with 27 touchdowns. His favorite targets, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, they've combined for over 1,300 receiving yards together and 13 touchdowns. The Buccaneers also lead the NFL in offensive yards per play at home. Meanwhile, defensively, Tampa's got the #2 rush defense in the NFL. The Bucs are holding their opponents to just 79 yards a game on the ground. Devin White has 79 tackles along with a couple of sacks. Meanwhile, Levante David has 56 tackles and a couple of PBUs. They're taking on a 3-6 Giants team who's gotten the W just 1 time on the road this year. The Giants are in the bottom 5 in pass defense on the road. They're also allowing over 370 yards of total offense per contest. Now, offensively, New York's scoring only 19 points a game, and they've really failed to establish a proper run game all season long. Now, injury-wise, Ebner, Booker, Shepard, Barkley, Carter, Pettis, Smith, and Brightwell are questionable. Meanwhile, for Tampa, Gronk and Sherman are out. Delaney, Vita Vea, and Brown are questionable. Tampa's 3-1 to the over at Raymond James Stadium. Meanwhile, the Giants are 3-1 to the over when traveling. I'm going to lean toward Tampa Bay -11, over 49.5. And with that, guys, now it's time for our quick pick recap. Powered to you by my website at brockpage.com, where we are hitting at 61% in our last 18 NFL tier package picks. And with that, I'm going to lean toward New England -7, under 47.5. Chicago +7, under 45 and a hook. I also like Green Bay -2.5, under 49. Cleveland -10, under 44. Give me the New York Jets +3, over 44.5. I also like San Francisco -6.5, under 45. Give me Tennessee -10.5, under 44. I also like the Buffalo Bills -7, over 50. Give me Carolina -3, under 43. New Orleans Saints +1.5, over 43 points. Cincinnati -1, over 50. Dallas +3, under 55.5. Arizona -2.5, under 49. Give me Pittsburgh +5, over 47. Before I give you my next and final free pick for the video, one final reminder that we are hitting at 61% in our last 18 NFL tier package picks on brockpage.com. We're also 3-0 in our last 3 college football tier package picks on that very same website. I'm going to lean toward Tampa Bay -11, over 49.5. And with that, guys, now it's time for our shout out of the day. And that's going to go to Mr. Smith, who said the other day, "Thanks for the info, Brock." And with that, guys, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on brockpage.com. Now, if you guys do end up getting a membership here today on that website, just keep in mind you're going to get billed the day you sign up and then the first of every month following that. So if you do end up getting a membership here today on brockpage.com, you are going to get access to that content all the way through the end of November. Although I do tell folks in every single video, the earlier in the month you sign up, the better. But most importantly, guys, got to thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. I really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. I certainly enjoy producing it for you each and every day, almost every day. We finally missed a day this past Monday because I was sick as a dog. It was not COVID. It was a lot of time spent in the bathroom. I'll just put it to you that way without getting too disgusting. But anyway, guys, got to thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. And with that said, guys, happy Tuesday to you. Best of luck to you. And I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at brockpage.com.